Welcome, Meatsmiths. You're listening to a Meatsmith harvest.
Restoring husbandry to prosperity.
By means of the traditions of our fathers. This dialogue picks up where we left off in our last episode's conversation. You can find part 1 on our website, YouTube, or iTunes. If the content resonates with you, please consider supporting our team by going to patreon.com/Meatsmith and donating a small monthly pledge. This goes directly toward more free media headed your way. Thanks for staying tuned for part 2. Yeah. Well, and the thing too is when you have a natural group of people coming together to build something, like in, let's say the jiu-jitsu community, or like at our church, there's some church sports leagues that we have. The idea is a natural thing, I think.
Yeah.
No one's trying to say, well, we're going to do this and we're going to save our souls.
Right.
You know, this, you can grow in virtue, and that may be part of how God is saving you, but it's not, the goods that you're getting out of that community are natural.
Right.
And so when a leader says, well, I'm going to lead this thing, or I'm going to organize this thing, we can know if we're going to follow it, because, well, do I need that good? Do I need that natural good?
Right.
If I do, then I think I might join that community, whether it's soccer or soap making or whatever. But it also is very finite. You know, it has a beginning and it has an end. But the end is always like a natural.
Yeah.
If it's a human-made community.
Yeah. Right. And then whereas the way a cult functions is you are not free to make that determination.
Oh, yeah.
Do I need that good?
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's what the slavery of the will is it's really bad.
Yeah.
It means you can't fulfill any of your duties or responsibilities.
And also they flip it the other way too, where they say what I'm giving you is supernatural good.
Right.
So it's not just natural anymore.
Yeah.
It's you must do this if you want to be saved.
Yeah.
And we're really good at getting confused by that. It sounds obvious. Like, of course I wouldn't get involved in that. But we're really good at being fuzzy and unclear with our definitions. And so in church especially, it's easy to think, well, do I have to be a part of this? Is my salvation at stake? Or, you know?
Well, I think that is slavery. Slavery is a hindrance of the good use of power, which I think is from Thomas. Servitus est impedimentum boni usus potestatis. And we can use, you know, we have a right to a particular power to accomplish a particular end because we have a particular duty to fulfill. And so that is why we actually need to be free. It's for the fulfillment of our duties.
Yes.
That's the main reason. It's not license. So slavery, usually it's the state of not being able to, it's hindering the good use of your power to decide whether or not we can be part of this. And so that's why I just think a telltale sign of that cultist mentality is you're fuzzy about that. You don't know. And so you're coerced in the end by intimidation or peer pressure or fear, mainly fear.
Yeah.
Yeah, if strict, you know, physical force doesn't work.
Well, what you said just reminded me too that a community should help lead you further into the execution of your own duties. It's not primarily to promote leisure or feel goods. Like that may happen. That may be, you know, supplemental or consequential. It might be part of it, but it's not the primary element of it.
Yeah, I think to be happy, we have to fulfill our duties. And that's actually what happiness, that's a large part of what happiness is. It's ultimately possessing the highest good, which is God. So it's the beatific vision. And And that's a lot of that happens through just doing our duty, just accepting our duty, which accords with our nature as husbands, wives, fathers, mothers. And so friends and community, the word that Thomas uses is like they concur. They can concur with that, with the end of attaining happiness. Or I've even seen it like they're congruous with it, which is a way to say it's like they come alongside. They can help. They are an assist, but they are not behind you as a motive, and they're not in front of you dragging you along. They're beside. They can concur. You can do it together, but they're also not substantially essential. Thomas says that explicitly. It is not necessary for man's absolute happiness to be in community, to have a friend right there.
Okay.
Strictly speaking of what, the happiness of the human is, which is the beatific vision.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that reminds me of the definition that Aristotle gives friendship, which is actually we've retained a lot of it in Christian circles. And it's not bad. There's several ways that a friend can develop. One is if it's for utilitarian purposes, like you're learning how to fix a tractor, and there's a guy right there or you hire a guy and he helps you and he might teach you some things and you're doing it together, and then a little friendship can develop. So that's more utilitarian. There's a couple others I can't remember. One of them is like I think the best kind of friendship is when you meditate on God and you discover God together, and it is that triangle where you're getting closer to God, and they're getting closer to God, and you're consequentially you are getting closer to each other, but your reference point is God,
right?
And
it's a triangulation.
And that, but once you like break off and like, no, I want to be closer to you, then it's like that doesn't work. So our final end is God. Every one of us. But it's delightful when God puts friends in our path.
Yeah, well, and I think it's all of this whole series, just 2 series, however many series is a podcast this ends up being, it's in reference to a question that someone submitted.
Yes. Do you have that?
Which is how, I think it's in there somewhere. It is. It's like at the beginning of that. But how to choose, do I have to choose, given the choice between community, worship, and land, a farming opportunity. How do I make the choice amongst those? How do I make that call? If you have to move to a place, or if you're in a place and one of those things is lacking, do you move? Well, I've got a great community here and I've got some land, but we can't make it to Mass, or at least not to a reverent Mass that helps us be disposed to receive God's grace. I'm basically holding my nose and closing my eyes every Sunday, which is not being rightly disposed. Or, we have a great church. We have half an acre just in town. Do I leave the church in order to get the land? The agrarian life. And I don't know if through all of our ramblings, I think the right ordering can be derived. But if you conceive of your final end as union with God, conformity with God, the beatific, which is contemplation of God, the beatific vision, then whatever helps you to that end. And God has given us our duties in life, and literally on the most basic sense, like the duty of a father and a mother, to procreate and educate your children, which means the dad has to supply the material means for that to happen, and the mother has to educate, and so does the dad, and it's all, those are your duties, and your duty is first to get your soul into heaven, and then your spouse and your children. And so what good is most essential to that enterprise?
Right.
that's the question. So that would be the first good. That would be the number one.
Yeah.
And objectively, as Catholics, we know that it is grace. Because we can't even fulfill our nature, let alone our debt to God in charity, supernaturally, but just we can't even fulfill our own natural being without grace. And we know that grace comes from the sacraments, the Holy Eucharist, from baptism, from confession. That's what those are. They give you a created share in the life of God. So there is no those are the greatest common goods. Those are the ultimate. So anything that would deprive you of the sacraments, that in society, in the history of the universe and the world, and in every nation, is the greatest assault on the common good that it is possible to levy. Because without that grace, you can't fulfill your nature, which means you're not going to be able to fulfill your duties, which means you're going to be disordered. You will lose the tranquility of order, and you will be a slave.
Yeah.
So that's the order.
Yeah. Well, and we know people like, we've done podcasts now on back to the land, getting on some acreage to raise your kids, and that's all good, and that's what we believe that. We also know families that have lived on 5 acres, and dad's job took him away from the land too much, and so they downsized, and they got rid of the family farm,
Right.
for a little bit less land, but it meant dad would be home more.
Yeah.
And that was what they needed to do.
Because that's more order.
Yeah, that's right. So if it will, whatever increases order in the home, which that's what peace is. Peace is the tranquility of order. So it may mean that you have a few other external surroundings change, but if the internal piece of the home is there, dad, mom, kids, and it's never perfect, but it's, well, what kind of perfect are we looking for?
Yeah.
We need to be perfect as our Heavenly Father is perfect, not how the world sees it.
Right,
So
because you don't want to sacrifice your children to perfect tomatoes, for example.
that's a good example.
We just, because the tomatoes are there to feed the children.
Right.
That is their ordering.
Right.
And so is the homemade bacon
Yeah.
and all of that. It does have an end. It's helpful to separate those, like we were saying earlier, to realize you do have a body and your children have bodies. And it's we are derelict in our duty if we don't feed our bodies. It's a dereliction to our soul if we don't properly nurture our bodies. It's a moral obligation to care for your body and for the bodies of your children. And that is super, well, okay, not super, it's good. It's super good. And we can just be happy with that.
Yeah.
Like it's really good to eat good bacon.
Yeah.
That is good. Go ahead and thank God for that. But I think that, I don't know what it is. I know I have been tempted to elevate that to like, well, if we could just raise our own pig, if we could just grow all of our own fodder, if we could just have this particular farming utopia, then everything will be good. And that's not true. That is ordered towards the preservation of your body. And we don't need to feel like that downgrades the importance or our enjoyment of farming, of agriculture. Like, no, that is the good life. It's a material good. Full stop.
Yeah.
We don't have to adorn it with spiritual value that isn't there. If you want to, the real way to do that is to get yourself in a state of grace, because then that does change everything.
That's
It's
true.
actually grace that changes all the things. And it is what builds upon nature, because nature is the kind of thing that can be built upon by grace.
Yes, right.
So that's really the way to elevate
Yeah.
all of your agrarianism.
Yeah. Okay. I found that email, but let me switch. Going back, we just keep coming back to nature and grace. We have to get a real Thomist on here, and I have one in mind, but we keep coming back to this over and over again. What is the relationship between nature and grace? Okay. But for the Catholic, the answer is clear. He knows that supernatural grace, working through the natural qualities of man alone, bring him safely to his final home. But he knows too that natural qualities, as well as supernatural grace, are the gifts of Almighty God. The former, as it were, the receptacle of the latter. Sin, with its endless train of disorganization and unhappiness, is the negation of the one and the refusal of the other. Both are necessary to the full life of man upon the earth. And that comes from an essay titled The Community, from this collection of essays, Flee to the Fields, Faith and Works of the Catholic Land Movement.
Yeah.
Not everything in here is dogma, but it's really good mind food.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, and here, I'm going to segue into this other quote. Okay, so what do Catholics mean by civilization? According to Father Alain Laurent, an SSPX, so he's at SSPX, French poet Baudelaire's definition is the best. True civilization does not lie in gas, nor in steam, nor in turntables. It lies in the reduction of the traces of original sin. That is what true civilization is.
Right.
It's in, yeah.
Well, and I think that it could be argued then that it is therefore agrarian on the domestic scale.
Yeah.
Because St. Thomas says, according to Dr. Meloche of the Alcuin Institute, who knows, he could say this entire podcast in 4 minutes and it would be more comprehensible and better than anything.
We're going to get him on here.
Well, we will. But he highlights that St. Thomas says that one of the reasons that farming is a good, that going to the land is a good, is because it has within it a natural check to concupiscence. So if the purpose of civilization is to reduce the effects of original sin, that's farming does that, which makes sense because there's limits. It's hard to, there's always the burden of abundance that we talk about. It's wild, but it always requires some self-denial of you. You will have more bacon than you can eat, but you're also just going to be eating bacon for about 5 weeks. And it'll be awesome. So there's always limitations that are put there by nature, by the limitations of the soil, by the limitations of how much you can feed your pig, and that everything comes through labor and toil, and the kind of labor and toil that invokes and demands from you the use of your entire reason and your will and your strength. So it requires everything of you as a whole human, which is why there's dignity in that kind of work. But yeah, so all of that to say that it is a natural check, whereas we have arranged, this is all from Dr. Meloche, by the way. And we'll get him on to say these things better at some point. But that's what is distinct about the domestic farming project relative to acquiring those goods, not by the sweat of your brow, but by trade. That actually permits the accumulation of goods, which is why it makes you effeminate, which does not mean feminine. Effeminate means you have a disordered attachment to comfort. And trade can facilitate that. It's not a given, but relative to the agrarian project, you can stockpile Doritos. Like, you can buy more than you need through trade. And this is why historically, Dr. Meloche mentions this, Aristotle, recommended that soldiers are not allowed to participate in trade because it makes them weak.
Oh, wow.
They have to be subsistent. They have to sustain themselves.
Yes.
So that's one of the primary benefits of farming, is that it can be an aid, it can be a help. It has natural limits.
Yes.
Natural limitations to our excesses, to the amassing of goods, and all that a vice is an excess, right? And that's exactly what concupiscence is. The effects of original sin is we let our appetites rule the will.
Yeah.
And farming has natural checks to that. Now, I think you still actually need grace to cooperate with those natural checks in the natural order. And so it would be a gift of God insofar as we are able to do that. That's why, hallowed be thy name, the grace is first and last of this entire project.
Right.
Because it's not just an abstract concept, it's actually the life of the Creator who made all the things. So if you want to be in touch with the natural order, you need the life of the Creator who not only made it, but maintains every molecule in existence, which is a good. That is a good that all things have, even things that we call bad things. The fact that they exist is better that they don't.
Yeah.
And that is a gift of God who holds them in being. And so to actually be a partaker of grace is to have that divine life.
Yeah.
So it aligns you with the natural order.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah. Well, and it gets to a point when you are in a state of grace and you're confident of that natural goods, natural activities, natural realities can be elevated into the level of merit, being meritorious.
Yes.
Where you can merit this. I need a technical theologian to help me because I don't want to say something wrong. But on the level of sacrifice, my activity isn't ho-hum anymore. I am unifying. I'm uniting it with the Lord.
Yeah.
So that's who's elevating it.
Yeah.
But it's not this materialistic, just dead end of my activity.
Right.
Is if it's done in a prayerful way, then something natural like making a meal, sacrificing and sitting on the couch and reading a book to my kid, which is natural and a good. It is a good. It's that through Christ can be elevated and merit grace.
It can echo in eternity.
Yeah,
and that's where we have another moon word, but like mundane.
Oh. Okay.
But it's not munis. It's
Okay.
mundo. It's the world.
The world. Okay.
So
Of
it's
the
just
world.
a worldly activity.
Yes.
And if grace is building upon nature, there's no purely mundane.
Well, that's kind of why the angels are a little bit, and not that they're jealous, but if they could be, they would be jealous of the fact that we can suffer because our bodily repugnance to things that are mundane, and they're different for everyone. That's what can be united to the sacrifice of our Lord.
Yes, the act of overcoming it.
Yes.
Yes, the angels don't have that because they don't have that problem.
Yeah.
So they don't get the merit of overcoming it.
Yeah.
Yeah, to overcome the repugnance of our nature. That's
And there's just, what else is farming but that? Like
Yes.
you're literally toiling through rocks and thorns but all that can be offered.
Well, and isn't that what penance is? I mean, the fall in Genesis, God gave us a penance. It's not just like a slap on the hand. It's, here's how you're going to mend yourselves with my grace. You are going to toil in bramble and with stones to produce your food, and the earth is going to yield you thorns and thistles. Farming is like primordial penance. That's what it is. And it's good that it is that, because our first sin was a sin against abstinence. So it fits the crime, it fits the sin. It's a penance, it's a reparation. This is why farming is restorative. It repairs not just, an ecological degradation, though it definitely can do that if it's done properly, but actually a divine obligation and debt to the God of creation whom we have offended. So it's actually deeply, eternally, it's reparation. Again, with grace, it can be.
Yeah.
The poor's head in hand bear I, bedecked with bays and rosemary.
How many people do you know who are building their home culture around seasonal harvest and feasting? Or that are hunting as you are for self-sufficiency and back to the land values? Or that share your artist's passion for human-scale meatcraft? At FarmsteadMeatsmith.com, we've created a community of hundreds of omnivores from around the world with these shared goals, and 2 major places for them to learn from and inspire one another. First, we have our semi-annual hands-on educational event, The Family Pig, here at our Heartland homestead in Oklahoma. Come meet Brandon, get your elbows greasy, and over the course of 3 days, kill, cut, cure, and cook 2 pigs completely. You'll rub those greasy elbows with other meatsmiths from around the country, sharing meals and conversations to inspire you for years to come. Secondly, for more remote learning, over at FarmsteadMeatsmith.com, we host a purely digital membership program with an archive of film and textual resources 5 years deep now. And both our on-site classes and online program include access to our most unique and rewarding private community Facebook page, Meatsmith Table, which is the only international network by and for homesteaders harvesting animals on a domestic scale using traditional and regional methods. We've been told that our classes are life-changing and the membership program unparalleled in quality and quantity. To get a taste of our education, search FarmsteadMeatsmith.com and our YouTube channel for our free films, conversations, and downloads. Explore how we and other meatsmiths across the globe may best come alongside you and support you in building your home around the harvest. Please head to FarmsteadMeatsmith.com today.
It hardens us too, because it's really hard. Penance is hard. I mean, we're sitting here in a comfortable room in contemplative silence, which we never have. It's it feels a little bit artificial because
It is.
for me at least, you're out here a little bit more than I am, but having 8 children, all the voices, it can be hard. It's frazzling. It's but it makes it it's tilling the soil of my soul too, and I can see how when sin is gradually removed, very gently, very gradually, the society and the community of our home can flourish more, especially as the mother. That's really key, to be open to that. And is death, and I guess what I'm saying is, you're going to listen to this podcast and then go, and then the first thing's going to punch you in the face, and it's going to be hard, but that is when God is trying to work, if we can accept that and not fight against it.
Yeah, so when we come to that quandary of, do we choose the land or worship, or what was the other thing? Oh, community.
Yeah, community is not going to help me when I'm in the trenches with my kids, like at home. Occasionally,
Which is most.
which is 90% of the time.
Yeah, it can be an aid, but
Most of my battles of fighting, trying to grow in virtue, trying to withhold my vice, kill my vice, they happen at home in the quiet, in the hidden,
in the 1,000 natural little hair shirts that are woven for you by your creator,
Right.
the mere fulfillment of the duties of
Yeah.
your state.
Yeah.
Just the prompt doing of the duty that is a great penance. And that, I mean, that's much better than any extra austerities or fastings that we might self-impose, according to Father Matteo Crowley. The ones that are given us just in our daily lives, just to fulfill our duties. If we do them promptly, without complaining, that is the way of sanctification.
Yeah.
So ultimately, it's of those three, you got to choose worship.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the right one, and it's for a technical reason. It's technically where the grace is, and without that, we
Right.
can do nothing.
Right.
And I think it's what our Lord says when he says, "Seek first the kingdom of God, and then all these things will be added unto you." So it does take faith, which is a supernatural gift. But that is true, and all of history bears it out. I mean, think of what a monastery is. It's a group of people that prioritize contemplating God over eating, over everything. And frequently, all of the orders started because they even did it over community. I mean, how many, I think all of the orders were started by, some saintly person walking off into the great wild alone to pray. And then people will not leave him alone, he or she, and they just, they glom around them. And then you have a community as an accident to the essential relationship with God, the prayer, and the way of grace.
Yeah.
And then you get a monastery, and then you get Christendom.
Yeah.
You multiply the monasteries and the cathedrals a few times,
Yeah.
and you have Christendom.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if God took away Christendom or the edifices of Christendom because we thought that they were the victory rather than the victory in here.
Yeah, because ultimately the community, the walls wherein communion happens, are there to serve what's happening inside.
That's right.
It's not.
That's right. Yeah.
It's not for the sake of the walls.
Yeah.
Actually, they are not an end in themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I think of the boxer. For some reason, that analogy is coming to me. The boxer who's in the boxing ring. And like when I go back inside after we shut off the podcast, I'm going to go back into 8 children who are in varying degrees of virtue. And I need to be like a stronghold. I need to not cave to their appetites. And so, and that's just between me and God. And I can't, I lean on you, we have our community. And even at the church, if someone's in real dire need and someone's dying, sure, everyone pitches in and we are liberal with our going outside of our walls, or even in small ways too, like coffee on Sundays, at a moderate level, checking in with everyone. Are you okay? Are you alive? Are you floating? But where someone grows is in the boxing ring, mano a mano. You against yourself, basically, and then a boxer will occasionally get punched super hard, so he has to take a break, and then the community can rush in and sort of help him out, give him water, heal his cuts, and then give him some pep talk, and then he has to go back out, and that's the spiritual life, and the life of a farmer.
Yeah, and how much more would you value in the trenches like that, in the ring, the common goods than the mere material goods? You think about what goods a community could give you that would be an aid to that. It's water's pretty good. I'm gonna get thirsty again though, but when I just keep thinking about the truth, goodness, and beauty. If you want to build community, build a beautiful thing that everyone can see.
Yeah.
Do a good thing that is not diminished in the doing. You can do works of charity, but also teach a true thing. As many people as can hear, can receive the truth, and the truth is not diminished. And those are actually the things that unite a community. And in the end, when you're really suffering in fulfilling the duties of your state, or through extraordinary suffering, that's not common to all of us, the things you really, really want that actually will sustain your soul to endure is truth, goodness, and beauty.
Well, that's exactly, so it's not divorced from the material. And that's why God is so wonderful, is we don't have to negate the material in order to reach the supernatural goods.
Yeah.
Because Plinio Correa that I mentioned, Dr. Plinio Olivera Correa, he, in one of his, all of my papers, sorry everyone, he says that communities, or better, society, is birthed precisely through what you just said, which is through the observance of devotion, piety. That's how villages are born. And it's not superimposed by central planning. It's from the ground up. It's the grassroots. So this is in another article that I'll link to, called Regionalism. It's a nice story of organic society formed around pilgrimages. So this prayer, okay?
There you go.
The correct way to govern is to permit regions to develop naturally according to the fundamental principle of an organic society. This is the principle. Everything licit should be allowed the greatest possible freedom. What is good should be given the liberty to develop. Then, when one good thing mixes with another, a third is usually generated. Let the pilgrims come and go freely. Let a road be built for their needs. Propitiate conditions for inns to be established along the way. Help the chapels to be built. This is to govern organically. It is not to oblige people to do what was planned artificially by a group of technicians. So that's originally how villages and towns
all over Europe
grew, was through pilgrimages. Is you have one group of people and they want to go to that amazing cathedral over there. It's going to take several days though, so we have to build an inn, which means we have to have farmland and make food for the restaurants or the pubs, and we have to have carts built and horses and stables, and all that requires material goods, economy. So that's how it grows.
Yeah, I think you could say the pioneer of a civilization or of a community is the actions that are necessary for worship.
That's
So,
right.
We're going to build a church so we can have the mass. And then we're going to grow wheat, and we're going to grow grapes for the Eucharist. And
linen for the linens.
The act of keeping bees for the candles. The act of doing those things with the final cause as the worship of God gives you, as a gift, community. Here you go, you can have it. Because that is actually an ordered society. If that is the goal towards everyone, which everyone tends. And that is what happened. Like that's how you take 500 years to build a cathedral. Which means you have a multi-generational project that is passed on from generation to generation that makes no, massive financial return. Although now their value is, beyond money. We can't even quantify the value of a medieval cathedral that was finished in the 1100s and started in 750, right? Literally surpassing value. And for everyone, it's even if you don't go there, the beauty that it is a common good. And you will see people unite around the common good of a church. Even if they don't go to church, they will unite to preserve it. They will form a community around preserving that beauty on their skyline, which they regard as a common good. This is how we act. When we have those the threat of losing those goods that are not diminished in the sharing.
Yeah. Well, and because they're beyond money now, that's why we don't value them.
Yes, as we become more and more
Yeah.
materialistic.
Well, and that reminds me, I have one more little quote here from this article. What do we mean by Catholics? Okay, I know. This article comes from 1 Peter 5. Who is like God, rebuilding Catholic social order. Okay, I'll try to make this we're closing it up, we're wrapping it up here. And I'll link to it. But let's stop and think about that for a minute. For civilizational purposes, it doesn't mean much if your society has self-driving cars and smart cities and little robots to pick up garbage in the street, if it is simultaneously morally corrupt. On the other hand, you can have civilization when horses are the backbone of the transportation industry and air conditioning doesn't exist, as long as your horse-drawn cart is pulling you through 14th century France, where every prospect reminds you that you have an immortal soul. In every square stands a church whose spire points out your celestial goal, and where the 10 Commandments reign unquestioned as the common standard of behavior.
That's great.
Unquote. But that is civilization. When we build something that ultimately it requires natural means and tools and materials, but it is for a higher purpose. So your churches remind you of your immortality. Your hospitals are actually healing you, which many of them don't anymore. Your universities are teaching you and not corrupting you or taking away your innocence. This is how culture was born. Was the end, the telos, was of a higher order, not just the temporal order.
Yeah.
But,
Yes. Speaking of order, I hear footsteps.
Yeah. Well, what were you? Go ahead. I'll Oh, hi.
Oh, hi, Thomasina.
I have a breach. How are you?
It's okay.
here,
She
you
can
wanna sit with me
sit
for a
on Mama's lap.
Okay, you sit still, okay? Okay.
I do like, there's a humility about that kind of life too. Because, you just read that quote and they said you don't need all of these modern technological conveniences. There's something incredibly, once you have an ordered perspective, once you see the shallowness of those things and of a lot of them, and especially of the food that they produce, there's something incredibly superfluous about them. Like, it's a remarkable degree of complexity and effort, an entire economy that goes into producing a smartphone. And a smartphone is immensely useless. And I know that sounds weird, but as far as like the elemental human happiness and flourishing, if it's not a positive evil, it is at least an extraordinary effort at uselessness, like remarkable global concerted effort to create a very, very complex and useless thing. If we're just talking about elemental human happiness again.
Yeah,
Elemental.
right.
And that reminded me of Brillat-Savarin in The Physiology of Taste. He starts with these very authoritative aphorisms at the beginning that are just delicious and brazen. One of them is, the discovery of a new dish does more for human happiness than the discovery of a star. And there's something inherently humble about cooking something well in your home that is so much more valuable and so transcendently better than finding more stars in space with our Hubble telescopes. And it just highlights the humility of the whole project. And actually, that's really where the good life is. We don't need to stretch out too far. beyond that. And I would say also part of that humility, and which again coincides with that delight, is making good lamb chops. Because Andrew has a question about that.
That's a good segue.
And it's literally, I think it's not, this totally applies because heroically, with heroic virtue, Andrew tried to make chops on a plastic table
Oh.
that bounces.
Oh. Oh my goodness.
Yes. So he's having a hard time getting through the chops because he was equally heroically using a cleaver
Yeah.
on a plastic folding table. And he's wondering, like, am I missing something? Should I be able to do this? And the answer is no.
No.
Don't do it. It's so hard. It's impossible on a plastic table. But I think you definitely you derived merit from the attempt, because that is really hard. And just as essential to a heavy, sharp cleaver is a table that can absorb the blow. So in keeping with proper order, get a heavy wood table. And that's why the old butcher blocks were made specifically to weigh about 200 pounds. Why they're, almost 18 inches thick of solid wood. It's not just because they wore down quickly when they would scrape them and clean them, but you need that kind of contrary ballast. You need that kind of structure to absorb the blows of your nice heavy cleaver.
Yeah.
So I would not even try on a plastic table. I don't even go there.
Yeah, don't.
Because it is impossible. You'll break the table, you'll miss. Because if you have to swing that cleaver, and I do hope you swing. A lot of people get the mallet and they just pound it into the cleaver, but we're going for like cleaving with a cleaver in the true and proper sense of actually swinging a cleaver to cut and separate chops. You need that swing to be absorbed by a hard and heavy table. And if you don't have that, you're going to have to swing very hard just to make it through the bone.
Yeah.
And when you exert that kind of extra effort, that excess coercion of the chop, you're going to miss.
Yeah.
You're going to miss. And you're going to cut your chops into little tiny shreds of splintery bone.
And get mad.
Right. So
it's not good.
Part of the tranquility of order of making chops, as important as a cleaver, is the heavy table. Totally essential.
And because it's beyond money to get one, because they're so valuable.
It's true.
You can get them for a good price now.
Yeah, Andrew might have the capacity to make them too.
Oh, okay.
Well, of course he can.
Yeah.
He's one of the guys that can do all the things. But
okay.
Yeah, you either have to make it or find an antique.
Find a used one.
Yeah.
They're so they're a good price.
And I frequently have a separate table for the chops. Totally separate. Yeah. Left the rib chops 3 ribs thick. Yeah, there's fewer chops. That works. And it sounds delicious too. Nice thick ones anyway. On a 3-year-old ram. That's a big... That's going to be even denser bone because of the age of the animal. And how much more you're going to wish you had a solid table, because it does take a little more force to get them. Yeah, make a solid table.
Yeah.
It's delightful. Chops look very tricky. Chopping chops looks very tricky. It looks very professional until you get yourself a heavy table and a heavy cleaver. So the cleaver has to be heavy too, which I think yours is. But when you have both, the secret is that chops become easy, and it's a delight. You hear that sonorous, immobile thud of the cleaver in the table, and it doesn't budge or flex at all. It's incredibly gratifying. And you're more likely to make chops in the future. So.
Yeah.
I heard
That's
that
great.
train.
Did you hear the train?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had one little book plug before we totally wrap up. Oh, I gotta go too. Is these 2 books. I brought them out since we're talking about society. This is the Catholic Manual of Civility. It's a good homeschooling tool. And I just read it in little bite-sized pieces. I would say the caveat to this is everything in charity. So don't get caught up in all the externals of polite etiquette. At the same time, like we need to be more polite to each other. So just do it.
And children are not born knowing how to be polite.
Yeah.
As everyone knows, I hope. And instead, they learn politeness by running up against very annoyed adults and other kids.
Yeah.
So, which is not so nice.
Yeah.
But if you can teach them,
We're
that's
just ignorant.
a gift to them.
So many people respond to good teaching. They just need to be told.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, thanks for telling me not to pick my nose in public. I didn't know.
Believe it or not, they don't know.
I don't know.
They
I'm
don't
still
know.
learning a few things.
8-year-olds do not know that.
Well, in this culture too, like big adults don't even know that.
I know. I don't know a lot of it.
Here's another one too. Real quick, Thomasine, I'm going to show them this book, okay? This is The Rules of Civility and Decent Behavior in Company and Conversation by George Washington. And this has gotten me, it's really thin. It's gotten me pretty far in my homeschool though. And it's pretty, what do you call it when it's just little, like,
Digestible.
yeah, like proverbs kind of. Speak not injurious words, neither in jest or earnest. Scoff at none, although they give occasion. Just little things like that.
Mm-hmm.
All for building up society, building up good community, good culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think being a raging Mason, it might help for people to know that he did purloin most of those from the Jesuits. Isn't that what we discovered? Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I think
No.
so.
Okay. Very good. Well,
So they're solid. is
yeah.
what I'm saying.
Okay. Thanks for sitting down with me.
Yeah. Thank you.
And sort of distilling things that have come across our path the last 6 months, really,
Yeah.
and sharing them with people. Meatsmith, thank you for joining us and for listening to our take on all things meat making, householding, and culture keeping. We hope it's helped you in growing your home around the harvest.